Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Rob Young. I'm a business owner, and as a member of the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, I'll be representing the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce today as we interview Ken Moninski, and he's running for position one in District Number 5. So we want to welcome Ken, and he's going to answer some questions today so we can get to know him better. And the Chamber's come up with our top 8 questions we feel are relevant to business owners today. And so that the audience knows, he'll have 2 minutes to respond to each of them. So let's get started. Ken, welcome. And here's your first question. Please take a brief 2 minutes to share why you're running for and the 2 top things you want constituents to know about you as a candidate that make you uniquely qualified for the position.
Sure. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to address the business community in Issaquah and the Chamber members. My name is Ken Moninski. I am a 12-year resident of Maple Valley, Washington. I'm a husband, a father of 2 young girls, 2 young daughters that attend public school in Tahoma School District. I'm also a business owner. I own 2 aviation-related service companies that I've owned since about 2007. So, I mean, one of the important things to know about me that I think sets me apart from certainly my opponent in this position and some of the other folks running for office is, as a business owner, I've got to make my payroll every 2 weeks. And so the decisions coming out of Olympia have a direct effect on that. My ability to hire, to retain people, obviously coming through the pandemic, those policies have affected me. And although I'm a local business, I do business throughout the world. So I bring a little bit more of a worldview, something I think in the legislature will help me with the export-oriented economy that we have in the state. And I'm really running because I feel the need that we need to restore some balance in Olympia and that we need policies that are more practical. So we need representatives in Olympia that are less motivated by ideology and more motivated by policies that benefit, all folks in Washington. And I think too much of the policy that's gone on in the past few years hasn't taken into account either kind of the will of the voters or what's good in the long term for the state. So we've got a lot of challenges, whether it's housing affordability, whether it's current cost of living issues, crime and public safety is a big issue, as well as homelessness. And I just don't believe that the solutions, if you can call them that have come out of Olympia have served us well. And the Republican caucus is really ready to step into kind of that void and present practical, common sense policies that I think will kind of move us forward in a better direction. I ran in 2020 when no other Republican stepped in to run. And I was the only Republican that ran because I feel that the voters deserve a choice. They deserve a contrast in the vision for the future of the 5th legislative district, as well as the state of Washington. And I'm running again because I still don't feel that some of the basic issues are being addressed. And in fact, when it comes to things like public safety and the business environment, I think they've actually gotten worse over the last 2 years. So I want to see us restore balance to Olympia, correct some of those issues, and kind of put us forward for a better direction.
Okay, thank you, Ken. One important issue is the electrical grid in the region, actually around the country. It's aging, and the risk of reaching maximum capacity in cities like Issaquah are without a redundant energy infrastructure. That was a tongue twister. With the state's climate action plan and push towards all electric renewable energy, what are your plans to support the changes in infrastructure, and will you support Energize East Side?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I do support Energize East Side. I think especially when we talk about infrastructure, I think people fail to kind of sometimes consider the electrical grid. We always think of roads and highways, and especially in King County, the sewer system. But the electrical grid is a big part of that, and we have to continue to upgrade that infrastructure to support future growth. So I do support that particular project by Puget Sound Energy. I have big concerns about the climate policy that has come out of Olympia because again, I think it's very ideological based. It's also too much tied to what other states are doing, like California. I kind of believe in an all of the above approach to energy, but we have to understand that alternative energy does not equal replacement energy. And I just believe that we've gone too far in the other direction with diktats that are going to make energy more expensive for people that can least afford it, and B, during peak usage, eventually we're just not going to be able to get the power we need. We've seen what's happened in California, where they're telling people to reduce usage. We saw what happened in a state like Texas, which certainly isn't considered a vanguard of climate policy, but because of a push too quickly towards renewables, when those power sources go offline, they can't meet peak demand. So I think we need to take a cautious, a measured approach, one that supports alternative energy where it makes sense, but where it doesn't put our future in jeopardy by moving too fast when the technology is not there right now to completely go over to non-fossil fuels as an energy source. So again, I think common sense, practical, measured approach that recognizes that we can start a transition, but some of it is just way too aggressive for where we're at right now. And it's going to harm a lot of people. It's going to harm a lot of businesses. And we should just, like I said, move a little more cautiously and consider the ramifications of what's being passed in Olympia and dictated to everybody in the state.
All right, that makes sense too. As you know, the chamber is a catalyst and a champion for the business community. Washington's economic competitiveness and the vitality of any community is reliant on healthy businesses of all sizes, doesn't matter. Do you consider yourself business friendly? It seems like you are. You've already said that. And can you give examples of legislative issues that you would support that are beneficial to the business community?
Sure. Yeah, I am, as a business owner, again, I share in common with many of the members of the chamber that, the things that come out of Olympia have a direct effect on making payroll, on plans for expansion, just in general, what we really need in the state of Washington to continue to be competitive and foster a good environment is we need consistency in policy so that people, if they're starting a business or expanding their business, kind of understand what they can expect from Olympia in terms of taxation and regulation. I do not support kind of one size fits all, legislation in terms of, coming out with, like the ergonomic regulations they tried to put out. I'm also concerned though about a patchwork of regulation that we see popping up in cities, especially in King County, where, one city has this minimum wage, the other one might have a couple dollars higher. This one might have constraints on scheduling. Again, I think we need consistency and certainty. So I would certainly, as a general rule, try to support that in promoting the conditions and the environment for businesses to start and businesses to expand. On the taxation front, obviously, I was very much against the capital gains income tax. I think that's going to have a chilling effect on businesses. Again, I'm a small business owner. I have to admit, I haven't put much money into my own retirement accounts because I'm counting on being able to exit my business one day and use that, hopefully that lump sum of money as my retirement. And now the state's going to take, potentially 7% of it away. So, and I don't think most of the residents of the state support that. So I think from a taxation standpoint, the lack of a state income tax has been one of our strengths in attracting and retaining, especially high-tech businesses and startup businesses. And we need to maintain that competitive environment against other states. So the last thing I would say is I want to look as a legislator for points of friction in the economy, whether it be onerous licensing requirements or are there barriers to capital formation for people to be able to get the money to start businesses? So I think we can kind of, at a micro level in Olympia, look for, are there regulations or conditions that are preventing businesses from starting and growing? And as somebody involved in the business community, I want to kind of be a champion of those types of issues as well.
All right, that makes sense. We kind of touched on this originally, but nationwide, we're seeing an increase in crime. And when it comes to public safety, what initiatives would you support to keep citizens safe and reduce criminal activity?
Yeah, I mean, the Democratic caucus in the House and obviously the Senate passed, a series of bills after 2020 that really tied the hands of police officers. They went back in and corrected some of those, but especially when it comes to things like the ability of the police to pursue criminals, they kind of left that one as is. I think more worrying has been some of the proposals we've seen come out of Olympia about sentencing. And we're already seeing it where we're talking about releasing violent criminals back onto the streets. And I think, again, without having more Republicans in the House, even if the Republican caucus is not in the majority, you're going to see more and more of those proposals come to the floor and get voted on and probably pass. So I think it's important to know that, Republicans oppose the reduction of sentencings for things like drive-by shootings. We need to change some of the laws regarding lower level crimes, like making it easier to prosecute misdemeanors like, excuse me, like shoplifting. So I think overall, the thing that's worried me the most is we've seen kind of a break of the social compact between the citizens and the government when it comes to public safety. And in that, I think there's a feeling out there that the government, whether it's in Olympia or in some cases at the local level, just doesn't support law enforcement when it comes to keeping our communities safe. And I've talked to a lot of police officers. This is not really a money issue. They're demoralized. They're demoralized because they think that, the governments that they serve, the cities and the state, don't respect and support them anymore. And we need to ensure that, that we're giving them the tools to be able to go and deal with criminal activity. And we need to have prosecutors that have the resources to be able to then go and get convictions and take violent criminals off the street, as well as deal with lower level crime that, whether it's property theft or catalytic converter theft or, whatever, we need to deal with that as well. But obviously, with the Democrats in control in Olympia, we certainly have seen a degrading of public safety. And I think this is ideology at work. And we need to go to Olympia and come up with practical policies that restore law enforcement to their rightful position in our communities to keep us safe.
All right. We know that the B&O tax is necessary in our state and our city economies. We know that businesses support a large majority of local nonprofit organizations as well. As we experience those losses in the stock market, especially today, and increased inflation, continued supply chain issues, and employee shortages, inflation's very real. How do you intend to support businesses during this economic downturn?
Yeah.
If you have an answer, I'll listen.
I know, I wish I had all the answers, right? I mean, a lot of it is, a lot of what we find ourselves in now is obviously a result of the policies coming from the other Washington in terms of inflation and a lot of the supply chain problems. But I think at the state level, state government can do what the federal government should also be doing and that is for businesses, to provide conditions to make it easier to operate, to kind of get through this cycle. And that is lowering tax burden, looking at getting rid of regulations and barriers to doing business, making it less expensive to hire employees or, to be able to provide incentives to get employees hired. So, and yet all we see out of Olympia is, is increasing things, we're looking at probably increases in unemployment insurance. We're looking at, the minimum wage, pushing wages up. So we need to find policies, again, that provide this consistent environment for business that allow them to to get through this period of time till inflation can come back down. But the biggest thing is just quit putting all the regulations, new fees and taxes that continue to add costs to businesses, because they're not going to hire, they're not going to grow. And then, like you said, I mean, even the capital gains tax is going to have an effect on charitable giving, because that'll go into the calculation of individuals and probably even some corporate giving as well. So again, it goes back to, let's put practical policies in that help business, that help employees, that work for everybody, rather than this ideological bent that we got to go get more money out of the pockets of business people or productive employees and successful people, to fund an ever-growing government. That would be the best thing, would be just to kind of stop that.
Okay. We talked briefly, or you talked about housing and affordability of housing. We know that it's a supply and demand issue that cannot be solved by just government alone. Knowing that the east side has some highest land costs in the state, some of them highest in the country, actually. What are your plans to address housing? This is not an easy answer either.
Yeah, it's not, but I think I agree with the premise. The premise is this, it really is, it's not a demand issue. Obviously, there are a lot of people that need housing and want it and will buy it stuff. It's really a supply issue. We have the lowest per capita number of housing units in the country. We're just not building enough houses. And I believe that there are developers out there that will build, whether it's single family or multi-unit housing, again, if the conditions are right. And, it's a combination of, regulation adds tens of thousands of dollars to houses, and other units. The growth management plan, which I think is a valuable tool, especially at the local level for long-term planning, seems now to have been used as a weapon by special interest groups to prevent any kind of growth from occurring. And so that needs to be looked at to provide the flexibility for communities to, start allowing for the permitting of additional units of housing in their communities when they know that they need it. So I think it has to be kind of addressed on a number of different issues. And there's some tax issues, obviously, that go along with that as well. I know the Republican caucus has looked at this pretty closely, and they have some policies in terms regulatory wise to try and make things a little bit easier for developers to come in and obtain permits for building additional units. But what we're seeing is developers, especially that operate in a regional or nationwide scale, are choosing not to build in Washington because the environment's not good and the return on investment that they can get is better elsewhere. And we've got to change that calculus a little bit if we expect to start addressing this problem, because we need every incremental unit of housing that we can get done in this region in order to start addressing and bringing things back to equilibrium. Because I know it's affecting everybody. It's affecting businesses. Boeing's having trouble hiring people because they can't get anybody from out of state to come and move in here because they look at the housing costs. They're like, they can't make that math work. So,
yeah.
But I think there are some policies on a statewide level that can be implemented fairly quickly. Again, that will start to address some of the barriers to getting those units online.
All right. So another big one is the lack of efficient and reliable transportation. It hinders many areas on the east side, making housing and hiring, just like we just talked about, even more challenging for the business community. Share your position, if you would, on the Sound Transit coming to Issaquah and the King County transportation system that lacks north-south routes from Renton and Maple Valley to Issaquah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. My opinion on Sound Transit might either take a long time or maybe not be suitable for public consumption. But I'm wondering if I'll ever see the light rail come out to Issaquah. Maybe my grandkids will or something like that. But yeah, Sound Transit unfortunately has not been able to deliver on almost anything that they put out there. I don't even get to vote. Where I live in Maple Valley, I don't get to vote on anything having to do with Sound Transit because they gerrymandered my neighborhood out of their taxing district because they know we'll probably vote no. So Sound Transit's not a, is not really a democratic organization. It has no publicly elected officials on its board. It's all other, city and county elected officials. So it's in my opinion, it's just it's kind of a terrible setup to do mass transit, and it hasn't delivered. And I agree. I think the suburban parts, especially in King County, have largely been left out of the equation and forced to rely on other forms of transit. I think transportation policy should, for the most part, be based on mobility. I know that that's a foreign concept these days in Olympia, and that, Sound Transit is great, but it sucks up the most revenue to deliver the services to the least amount of people. And we ought to be looking at other forms of mass transit. Bus rapid transit should be expanded. We should look at making other corridors more efficient, like you're talking about between Maple Valley and Issaquah. And we need to look at funding on that. Again, the Democratic caucus has raised fees in the hundreds of percent on, license tabs and, vehicle title checks and all of these things that are going to affect the kind of the least among us, the people with the lowest income. They don't need to do that. They didn't need to raise any of these fees. We don't need to have a carbon tax scheme to pay for transportation. We can take existing sales tax on vehicles, dedicate more of that to the transportation fund. We can fund transportation. It's not a money problem. It's a problem of will and telling the voters what we're going to spend money on. So yeah, we need to improve mobility. I think it's funny. I think transportation is kind of bipartisan. I mean, in Issaquah, my opponent's going to tout, the Highway 18 interchange at I-90 and widening Highway 18. I don't think there's a politician out there that would disagree with any of those projects and wouldn't work, day and night to get them funded and completed. So that's actually an area that there's bipartisan. You send a Republican to the legislature from the 5th district, I'm going to work with Senator Mullet and whoever the seatmate is in the House to make sure those projects continue to get completed and funded and do what's right for the people of the 5th district.
Okay. Now, we'd like to leave the last question for you, Ken, open-ended, so that you could speak directly to the business community, what you'd like to share, and maybe something that we should have asked during the interview, but we didn't. So I'm going to let you take a couple minutes and just close this out, and then yeah.
I mean, I guess the thing to say to the business community especially is, I mean, I'm really concerned about the direction that state government has been going in, especially for the past 4 years. I just, we see time and time again where the voters express their will on issues, whether it's taxation, income tax, whether it's $30 car tabs, all of these issues where the voters speak, and the legislature goes back into session under Democrat leadership and kind of goes their own way and does their own thing. And it doesn't seem to be based on anything that's going to benefit all of us here in the 5th district in the state. So, I mean, I want to go to Olympia, like I said, to restore balance. I mean, the legislature should be a co-equal branch of government with the governor and should provide a check and balance to make sure that, all ideas are kind of being considered and we're putting forward the best policy to benefit individuals, businesses, to take care of the most vulnerable people in our state. And I just don't believe that that's happening. The transportation bill is the best example of that, where the Democrat caucus just went ahead and passed their own bill with all of these new taxes that weren't necessary without any Republican support. So, I want to see a legislature that's more balanced, that considers more points of view, and that produces policy that, again, benefits everybody, and it's practical common sense policy. It's not based on any ideology or any kind of, I guess I would call it kind of pie in the sky utopian ideals. It's just something that on the ground works. Again, I've been in business now for, going on 15 years. I deal with all kinds of these challenges, work with all kinds of different constituencies. I do business all over the world. And yet, I got to come home to Maple Valley, to my wife, to my two daughters that are in public schools, and realize that, everything that comes out of Olympia has an impact. And I believe that I'm uniquely qualified. Through my life experience, I'm not a politician, to go to Olympia and kind of bring a new perspective that'll move us in a better way forward. So I'm hopeful to have the support of the business community, but I realize that business is the catalyst that drives a lot of other things like employment, like quality of life. And I want the 5th District to continue to be, a great place to work, to live, and to raise your family. So I hopefully I'll have the support of the Issaquah Chamber. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Today's interview with Ken has been recorded and will be added to the Chamber YouTube channel for public viewing. And I'd like to thank Ken for taking the time today to address the business community and answer some of our questions.